Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Offing Podcast. I'm Ashaki Jackson, publisher of The Offing and your podcast host. On today's episode, novelist and attorney Natashia Deón reads excerpts from her 2021 novel, The Perishing, nominated for both an NAACP Image Award in Literature and a Hurston Wright Legacy Award in Fiction. Here is Natashia reading from The Perishing.
Excerpts from The Perishing by Natashia Deón. The Perishing is a novel about a woman who, despite trying, cannot die. She's immortal. Instead, she lives different lives through time where there are only two rules. She's always Black, but not always a woman. And in every new life, she remembers who she is and where she's been, until one fateful night when she finds herself naked in an alley in the 1930s Los Angeles with no memory. Chapter 1. My name is Sarah Shipley, and I've slept with 5 women. Since I married a man, no one asks the kind of persons I choose anymore. I've been married 6 times, all of them men, and all of them taken from me. By God or by man, death in all cases. But my first husband is who I remember most. First husband was once born in 1948 and was murdered, just like my third. But I wasn't surprised. Devastated, but not surprised. You see, we're all on the verge of somebody else's violence. It used to scare people when I let down my guard and confessed that my husbands were murdered. They would call me cursed, not unlucky. In fact, the word unlucky would only be used by those who thought I had something to do with it, 'cause no one's that unlucky. So now when people ask how my husbands died, I say they stopped breathing. I was 40 years old when first husband died, the first time. And in every life, 40 is the age when I start losing things, memories, my glasses, my friends. The frequency of their deaths make dying pedestrian. But not always. Sometimes it is life-altering. It hurts me to watch the anguish of others who don't understand it's not always over. Not for everybody. And first husband was devastated when he lost his mother, Florence Mary Clay. She had 9 kids. In 1956, when he was 8 years old, Mary walked off the cotton fields to work cleaning classrooms, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., $2 a week slave labor. But we all thought we were rich, first husband said. Mary Clay was the first woman janitor at his school in Mississippi, preschool through high school, one school for all the Negroes, and she kept the whole school clean by herself. At lunch, she worked in the lunchroom making sandwiches for all us children, first husband said, serving warm plates and apples, never missed a day, so folks respected my mama, he said. And on Sundays, my first husband and his brothers would walk up Columbus Street, their skin dark as wet soil and their haircuts lined and shaped into something like a helmet full of black flowers. They'd wear Sunday suits then, each pressed paper hard and without crinkle or sound, hand folded around their bodies like wearing origami. Folks would point and say, "Those are Mary Clay's kids," and they'd make room for them. That's how I knew about people, first husband said. Not by the way they treated me, but how they treated my mama, respected her. That's how I decided who I liked and who I didn't. The other children at school would straighten their chairs and pick up trash before the school day ended because they knew my mama was coming. First husband was 18 years old when his mama died. She was 61 years of age. So at her funeral, he started counting down his own life because he was convinced he wouldn't outlive her. He counted 43 more years to make something of himself. First thing he did was call off the wedding. You see, his girlfriend Olive was pregnant, and marriage was the Christian thing to do, but since his mama was gone, they had no reason to pretend they were religious. So he moved to California, and Olive said she'd stay with her family in Mississippi to have the baby, and that was that. By the time I met first husband, he was 32 years old and had already decided to stop chasing the son he'd abandoned in Mississippi. He said the best thing to do was to wait and to let his son find him when his son was ready. But every birthday that edged him closer to 61, he reminded me that he didn't have much time. I know I'll die by 60, he'd tell me, because I'm not worth more than what Mama had. And I'd argue. I'd tell him no one could know when his time was to die, but he said he did know, and then he proved it. First husband died at 60 years old, and I don't disagree with him anymore. When my first husband was 13 years old, he had a best friend named Sammy. At 13, Sammy told him, "I'll be dead in a week," and was. My husband and Sammy were in the Mississippi Youth Gospel Choir together, and they'd been invited to sing at a church in Alabama. The pay was food and shelter and rumors that Mahalia Jackson would be there. See, Mahalia was Sammy's savior after Christ himself, a goddess, and Mahalia had been the reason Sammy's mama never broke his legs. You see, Sammy's mama had heard that Mahalia had the same condition as Sammy, legs bowed like a wishbone from his hips to his feet yawned open at the knees and hardened like roof pitches curved outward. And Mahalia, his mama thought, was the only Black person alive with legs like his. So Sammy's mama did what Mahalia's auntie did. Instead of having the doctors break and reset Sammy's legs straight as prescribed, she rubbed the boy's legs down with grease and bathed him in boiled dishwater. The heat was tolerable, his mama thought. It would relax the bones, like chicken bones tumbled in hot broth, softened and flexible, and would dry stiff and straight in the sheet she wrapped around his legs at night. But come morning, his ankles and toes were blue from the tight bandages, because it would take time, of course. And the hope of this cure is why Sammy's legs never got broken. They never got healed either. Now, each of the kids, if they were going to the Mahalia Jackson choir competition in Alabama to sing, they'd have to pay their own bus fare from Mississippi. So the whole choir got good at chopping cotton for nickels a week. Sammy and my husband Billy put in hours every day from first light to nightfall, singing songs that Sammy had made up and written in ink on his arm with the ballpoint pen he found under the bus station bench. Sammy's falsetto became like the sweet sound of a cooing woman, so good that he earned himself the lead spot in the choir. But 5 days before they were supposed to leave on the bus, Sammy's mama told Sammy that she'd used his travel money. She said, "You need to pay for school clothes and not some trip to Alabama." Sammy was so disappointed when he found out about his money that he fell on the ground crying right in front of everybody. And after he begged his mama one more time, unsuccessfully, with dirt and straw tumbling down from his cheek, he made a new wish. A few days later, he started telling his friends, "You're not going to see me anymore." "But Sammy," my Billy said, "you'll see me, right? We're best friends." "No, not even you, Billy." Then a day later, the day before the choir left for Birmingham, Sammy asked my Billy's mama if she'd make his favorite dump cake, and she did. So before the bus left, before Sammy's week was up, Sammy and Billy snuck into the church building, sat in the pews, and ate a mess of pineapple and peach and butter and nuts with some mint, all dumped and baked in the cake batter. The end result was a distinctive flavor of strawberries. Proof that dump cake is life. No matter what you put in it, No matter what you try, how you're received is not always up to you. And that night, when they finished eating together, Sammy sang what my husband described as Sammy's last bit of sweet lovely, his notes high and soft like a fairy. It was the Wednesday of the ride back home from Alabama when everybody heard the news. Mrs. Johnson had phoned ahead to the school to let them know our failure, runners-up out of 25, and that our choir was on our way home. And when Mrs. Johnson came back to the singing hall to meet us, no one noticed her changed expression before she told us flatly, "Get on the bus." It made sense to our choir that she would say it that way because we had come to win after all. It had been hot that day, my husband said about the ride back, and the night hadn't cured it, so the starless 11 p.m. sky was like a boiled rag thrown over Birmingham, our bus and oven, he said, its windows bleeding with moisture. Then about halfway through the ride, Mrs. Johnson stood up and gripped her seat's back cushion, full-fingered, making frown lines in the plastic. Then she told everybody what happened. That earlier that day during summer school, some big kid in the lunchroom lifted Sammy up by his collar, then pushed him into the wall in such a peculiar way that it broke Sammy's neck. 13 years old, and he died instantly. My husband's mama was the one who had to clean his urine off the floor. So you see, we know, my husband told me. Sammy is proof that there's no point in trying to outlive the date you've been given. But folks like us, we just need to leave something good behind. But you, he said, not you, he told me. You've got forever. He said it because I had told him everything about my lives, because I promised to try to find him again, because I can't be sure I can. Because some people are bonded over lifetimes. Not a soulmate, that's a wasted term, but a kindred spirit. No, not spirit. The inarticulable part of ourselves. So everybody I love dies. And it doesn't matter, because most people won't survive everyone who loves them. Our lives are meant to mimic a passing breeze that won't return, but not me. People who are meant to be in our lives will find us, no matter how far we wander, even if when we find each other, we're lost, together. And I have to live with my losses forever, life after life, in new bodies, new cities, and new countries where I've always been Black, not always a woman. And sometimes I'll find my pair, like first husband, even though I won't search for him, even though I promised. Because for a while, I'll forget our before this, and finding him will be like a rediscovery, a shock of holy hallelujah. But we're supposed to forget ourselves and each other. But I remember because I'm broken now. He won't remember me because he's not. This is my undoing.
The New York Times named Natasha's first novel, Grace, a Best Book of the Year. Grace also earned Best Debut Novel recognition by the American Library Association's Black Caucus. Grace and The Perishing are available now at NatashiaDeón.com. Thank you for listening to the Offing Podcast. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform to stay up to date on new episodes. The Offing is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we rely on literature lovers and art enthusiasts like you to keep the lights on. You can support The Offing and this podcast by subscribing to our Patreon. Look for the link in our show notes below or visit patreon.com/theoffing. Take the offing wherever you go with one of our tote bags, bookmarks, pencils, or logo coffee mugs. Shop at wearepastdue.com/store/The Offing. The Offing Podcast is a Past Due production and was recorded at Past Due Studios in Los Angeles, California. This episode was produced by Christopher Chase Godwin. Katrina Mohn is the executive producer. Thanks again for listening to the Offing Podcast.